Kulamani Speak Out, Speak Truth, the dialogue segment. What is this dialogue about? It is about honest and often poignant discussions between Kulamani guest speakers or interviews of them, ranging from those with same or similar beliefs and perspectives to those about as far as you can go on the opposite side of the spectrum. The focus is on bringing level-headedness to the table by first identifying some common basic ground, not necessarily in positions or beliefs, though definitely including them, but at a minimum, basic human decency, respect, and non-aggression at the table for the sake of a civil, even if testy, discussion of a given matter. This is Kulamani Speak Out, Speak Truth, and you're here with your host, Mustafa-El Ajala, and also joining us, the guest today is Kit, Jim Kit Beadle, and Ty Albina. How are you doing?
Great, good.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Well, first, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself personally in terms of what your activity is in Milwaukee. You're there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin currently. And Kit, you first.
So, yeah, I moved up to Milwaukee about 4 years ago. Connected with Ty. She and I helped co-found the Milwaukee Lit Supply, where we send literature into prisoners. We got pretty much connected right around the 2018 prison strike. And then since then, we've just been working on various projects together, like the Lit Supply, the Crystal Kaiser Defense Committee, and just doing various prisoner support type stuff from the outside in, basically.
Okay. Ty, with regard to yourself, how long have you been involved with the Milwaukee Lit Supply and other activism in the Milwaukee area?
So I got started in about 2012 with doing anti-prison work, and the Lit Supply, Kit and I are both founders of that. So yeah, since it was started, I guess it was say 2019, we started that. Yeah, I also work on like some other anti-repression campaigns for people who have been targeted by police and are facing prison time. I think that's a big part of it. I'm an abolitionist to my core, so I'll say that primary work is shutting them prisons down.
Okay, the question I have for you is, and this is a question for both of you, what sparked your interest? I mean, what drove you to get involved in any type of activism, period, but particularly prison issues, you know what I'm saying? The prison industrial complex and abolitionist type movements. What drove you to
that? Well, for me, it was mostly just recognizing, this sort of, just exactly the extent of how truly unnatural and terrible these systems in place are. And the more that I, came to sort of discover in myself the way that I believe that the world should be and the way that I see things, and the more that I recognize that those things that are being done and those those actions taken by the prison industrial complex and the people who benefit from them are just diametrically opposed with everything that I believe. So, just there was that sort of like theoretical push. And then in terms of taking action, it was recognizing that there were opportunities to do things to push back on those things. And, just like since having moved to Milwaukee and like meeting Ty and a handful of other people that we have now like connected with. And that's just been like, learning what actions we can take and what kinds of things we can do to further the abolition movement and to, bring awareness to the general public about the, just the absolutely egregious actions that the Department of Corrections and all those other, things have taken against people.
Okay. And you, Ty?
Yeah, so I will say I've been a lifelong anarchist. My family raised me in sort of that realm. I have an older brother who's also an anarchist, and so prison work wasn't really my main function until about 2011 when I started dating a guy that was on federal probation. and then he got revoked, subsequently got revoked, and then was sent to a prison camp. While that was all happening, I was doing a lot of research on how that could possibly happen, like how people get revoked for the stupidest of things instead of getting help. And I just went down a rabbit hole of information and understanding and learning how that system works, and it just horrified me. And so, dealing with that, I actually ended up helping him walk out of a prison camp down in Texas, and we sort of got my own charges. So I'm a federal felon, and really just felt like this shouldn't be something that anybody else has to experience. It's racist. It's bullshit. It doesn't help. I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to swear. It's not allowed to, it shouldn't be happening to anyone, and it's not any kind of way for people to be rehabilitated and be able to function in society. So yeah, helping the most marginalized people of our world, it has always been the number one activity of choice for me. And once I realized that prisoners are truly the most marginalized, that became my primary function.
Yeah, knowledge is power. Information is how you get there. So that's great. Now, I remember speaking to you prior, kid, and you was telling me how originally you wasn't from Milwaukee. You was from South Philly?
Just outside.
Or Southwest Philly?
Yeah, just outside of Southwest. I lived in West Philly for about 7 years.
Okay. And what was your experience like growing up there? I mean, prior to your coming to Milwaukee, your young adult, teenage experience.
I mean, it was honestly like a pretty typical suburban, upbringing. I have family members who have been incarcerated on a couple different occasions and a couple different people, but I never really thought too much about it. The way that was represented to me as a child and like as even a young adult was always just, I never questioned the whole quote, do the crime, do the time type thing. And it was never something that I challenged in myself or really questioned. And so I never thought about it really. And then just, like Ty said about getting in that rabbit hole where you just recognize how this is, I have a cousin who goes in and out every other year for, drugs or alcohol or DUIs or whatever. He'll call me and he'll be like, oh, I just got out, whatever, every couple months, I feel like. And clearly, like, he struggles with addiction, and what they're doing is not in any way helping. All they're doing is putting them in county for a couple months. And it's like, clearly this doesn't work, there's nothing, and that's just one example of, but, it's like just now being able to reflect on those things and saying like, no, like this doesn't have to be like this, and people don't have to be treated this way.
Okay, another question I have, and I'm gonna get to Ty again in a second, but because I remember having a conversation with you before in terms of the police presence and where you came from in like Southwest Philly, the suburbs of Philly, and the police presence in Milwaukee. And what is the difference you notice between the two and the policing of the two communities, or is there some similarity in terms of the police presence, who the police target, or anything of that nature?
Yeah, so in my, like, when I was younger, this whole side of society was something that I was, privileged enough not to have to even pay attention to really. So, you would see police officers, and even I have a cousin who like is married to a cop, and like they're just, whatever, like people just think of them as just another facet of society. And then, but now, like, reflecting on it, the fact that I never had to think about them, or, like, yeah, everybody gets a little nervous when they're behind, when they're driving behind you. But, for me, it was always like, oh, I don't want to get a ticket, and then obviously recognizing now that for other people, it's much more severe. And in Philly specifically, the gentrification process has been, off the rails. I mean, I was just back there a week or two ago, and just, I mean, whole neighborhoods are just completely changed with these new buildings. I mean, I went to whole neighborhoods that used to be like majority, like, Black and brown communities. And, I'm going to see, like, one of my friends, like, lives in, 2nd and Cecil B. Moore. And I'm like up there and I'm like, dude, like, when did this happen? Like, the buildings are all unrecognizable. It looks like every single other city in America where these, they're called like 5-on-1s. And it's this new type of architecture. And it just looks everywhere else. And I'm like, what happened to this neighborhood? And it's like the police, like the police, the landlords, the realtors, like they all work together to displace the people who live there and bring in a whole new, different group of people, basically. And in West Philly specifically, there's like University City, which is kind of separated from West Philadelphia. And University City is like, pushing further and further west and actually pushing people from the neighborhoods that they lived in and grew up in and all that, pushing them out further and further west to where people are now moving out to the suburbs, like where I grew up. And those neighborhoods are changing and losing resources. And, like it's just being like, it's interesting, like kind of being removed from Philadelphia has kind of more so exposed me to how substantial these changes are and how they can occur.
Okay, and I'm going to comment on that in a minute. Ty, where did you really come from? I mean, in terms of, you're not from Milwaukee either, right?
Yeah, no.
Originally in the U.S., I heard you mention Texas. So did you spend a lot of time growing up in Texas, or?
No, yeah. I spent 2 years in Texas for a job right out of college. I actually live on every coast of the U.S. now.
Okay.
I was born in San Francisco, California at UCSF. And my dad is a first generation Filipino. I'm second generation Filipino, and my grandparents both emigrated from the Philippines, and they died before I was born. So, I went to school in North Carolina, and obviously I've lived in Wisconsin. So every single coast, a coastal state, and I'm just gonna like jump in a little bit. So, like my family, obviously emigrated to the U.S. to try to seek a better life. They did and came to San Francisco. It was very easy to get from the Philippines to San Francisco, and they stayed there. They lived in Bernal Heights, which is just one of the 7 hills in the San Francisco proper. And like I said, my grandparents died before I was born. I have a lot of family out there still. And I have some great titas and titos, uncles and aunts that live in the Philippines still. We're Ilocano, so that's from the that's one of the like native tribes in the Philippines, so I mean, for me, it was crazy. There was not much of a police presence ever in my life when I was in California, but it was very that was very much so thrust upon me when I came to Wisconsin. My family grew up in Cedarburg. We moved to Cedarburg for my dad's job. He's a dentist, and Cedarburg is a very white, very well off city in Ozaukee County, one of the richest counties in Wisconsin, and right off the bat, we were always targeted by the police there. They have a small police force. Us being brown and us being some of the only brown people to come into that city, and I have a white mom. We were targeted from a very young age. I moved there when I was 5, and that's really the first time that I became aware of the racism of cops and the systemic oppression that they enact on brown and black people of color, to keep those white communities and white families safe. And that's only gotten worse in Milwaukee itself.
Yes, actually, there's a lawsuit, a class action. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but I think it was filed in maybe 2017. Yes, 2017. The case is Charles Collins versus City of Milwaukee, and that's a class action which addressed the stop and frisk program, similar to the one that was in New York that pretty much the whole nation learned about, and that was going on in Milwaukee. And it was ushered in by, at the time, Police Chief Flynn, and it was called a broken windows policy.
Yes.
And it's a strategy that he described as proactive policing, in which they would stop citizens, pedestrians, in an effort that they themselves call saturation patrols. So you would have police on foot, on bicycles, in cars, and paddy wagons. They would do something called like field interviews and field contacts, where they would literally stop people, a modern day apartheid, if you ask me, in the United States. And so, and this is something that he actually said. He said, yes, I'm quoting Chief Flynn. He says, yes, of course, we're going to stop a lot of innocent people. You know what I mean? And then they did the percentages, and it was off the chain in terms of, you know, how many black people that got stopped. And the justification they used for, and brown people, and the justification they used for it was that, well, if you have a high crime neighborhood, then obviously you're going to have a higher percentage of stops there. But the studies show that even in areas that so-called were not high crime, the percentage of stops still was off the chain when it comes to stopping people of color. And so I want to know, I mean, obviously you mentioned that, you know, you're seeing a greater presence in Milwaukee. And I have a friend that used to live in Milwaukee that moved to Colorado Springs, and he had some of his grandchildren come there. And they were in Colorado Springs for a while, you know, for the summer vacation. And they was like, you know, where are the police at? You know, they were so used to seeing police every 15 minutes. They're like, where are the police at out here? You know, they came from Milwaukee. So I definitely can relate. And so have you yourself, I mean, being a person of color, I'm speaking to Ty in this respect, have you yourself experienced any of this type of racial profiling? I mean, whether in your pedestrian walk of life or while driving or anything of that nature in Milwaukee?
I mean, not so much in Milwaukee. I mean, I will say that yes, I've been pulled over for any little thing. It happens more so for me outside in when I go to predominantly communities where there are white people. When I pass more as, you know, in Milwaukee, I feel like I pass more as white instead of black, instead of a person of color. But in those white communities, I'm very clearly profiled as a person of color. And so I get pulled over a lot outside in the white communities, and that happened. I mean, walking, my brother and I would walk to school every day. My mom worked 2 jobs. My parents were divorced when I was in 5th grade, and so my little brother and I, we would walk to school every day, and we were maybe a 10-minute walk to our school. It wasn't far, and even if we were walking in the direction of the school, cops would pull us over on the sidewalk. I've even had cops not even in their uniforms on their way to work, not even on the job, pull over and stop us and harass us for not being in school or for being on our way to school when school was already in session. My brother was habitually truant. He had a hard time getting up in the morning, and so anytime we were supposed to be in school and not in school, we will be you know, held up to have to identify it and call our mom and try to figure out why the hell we weren't in school. So yeah, that's been my experience. I have, my grandmother has gone into she's passed now, but she was a jail minister. She did jail ministry for the church that I belong to. She went in there for 25 years into the Milwaukee County Jail every week. And so we would do walks for the homeless. We would go and see all of this. And the like relationship that we had with police was that they were always the ones creating the problem and not doing nothing to fix it, to fix those problems. I got a little off base there, but
and actually that's part of the program. I mean, if you read the lawsuit, you will see it in there. The fact that police were actually not only encouraged but pressured to stop people on their way to work if they didn't meet a certain quota. And the quota was like 2 arrests a day. And if they didn't meet that quota, they were encouraged to try to meet the quota on the way to work or on the way coming from work. So that's actually was a police policy that you experienced.
That helps them out because they get overtime. They get special, you know, they get more money as well when that as an individual when they do those things.
Yes. A question here I have for you, considering your Asian background, being a Filipino, and the current problem we're having with anti-Asian hate crimes across America. One, well, I think we know where it's stemming from, but I still like to get your own response from it. But two, the question is, have you actually experienced it yourself or witnessed it in Milwaukee in particular, but anywhere? I mean, since you in the last couple of years.
Oh yeah, I mean it definitely has had an uptick in this last year. I mean, just yesterday I got harassed, and it was actually by a black man. So I don't know what was wrong with him, but he was Dominican, or at least he was wearing a sweatshirt from the Dominican Republic. But yeah, I mean, just yesterday it happened. It happens. I'm sorry.
What took place?
So this man was standing out yelling outside. We was doing the May Day march, and we were standing outside the federal building, and he came out waving a Bible in the air and telling everybody to repent and all this. And then he made a comment about homosexuality. It was a bigoted comment, and that was the last straw for me. I turned around and I told him to GTFO, get the F out, and he turned around and said, "Oh, you miss," and I couldn't even understand. I was so furious. He started making comments about me and saying, you gotta fix yourself. You're still supposed to be one of us." And I was like, "Nope, that's wrong. I'm not one of you. You're a bigot. There's a difference there, and you need to fix yourself." So I can't even tell you what he said, because I was too busy yelling right back at him. But yeah, like being told to say, like, you should be respecting me, you should be on my side because we're the same. That's not right. I'm anti-hate all the way, and there's a problem if you're gonna be accosting people, especially people for their sexual preferences.
Okay, well, another question I have, and Kid, I'm going to get back to you in a minute, but this is in particular the tie with regard to what's going on with this anti-Asian hate, and you kind of commented on something I want to ask you about. First of all, before I touch that question, I was informed, Kid, because we had a pre-conversation, that last year you were greatly involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, including, producing Black Lives Matter t-shirts and protesting and whatnot. First of all, how did you get into that? I mean, was it the same thing that drove you in the previous activism to join the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah, I mean, so I believe that we all have to show up for each other, and
yeah.
It very, very much so. Like, I think very early on in the Black Lives Matter movement, it was discussed like all lives can't matter until Black lives matter, and black people being the most systemically repressed and oppressed people in the United States. That means that us brown people, we should not and are not going to get anywhere until we pick up the most marginalized people. And so for me, that's the message that really spoke to me and made me drive for that. And I agree with it. I 100% agree. The things that Asians and other and Hispanics and other brown natives experience is to me is never going to fall until we address the oppression that Black people have experienced, even if since slavery. And so if we can't come together on that, then we got a problem. We're not going to make it anywhere. And so that it was very important to me to come out and show out for that, and to show out as an Asian American, and show people that we as Black and brown people, we need to be unified in fighting this, and we start with Black oppression.
Okay, question here for you, Kit, and I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Ty, because I never have asked you this question. Have you yourself, Kit, experienced and see? I mean, we always talk about, well, not always, not we always anyway, but the topic of the day in terms of racism is racism that's committed against people of color. And by far and large, that is the greatest problem in America. That's part of America's United States inception. But there is in some cases, and I call it reactionary racism, but it's still racism, where you have people of color, black people in particular, that also engage in, like I say, that kind of reactionary racism. Have you yourself, kid, ever experienced racism against you being a white person, a Caucasian American, from black people?
I mean, not that I can think of.
Okay.
Even, like the very, very first thing that comes to mind is I worked at this store, and I worked at the store in like North Philly, and it was like I was one of like 4 white people that worked there, and this lady, Miss Ev, called me by a name of one of the other kids who worked there who was white, and I was like, whoa. I mean, I didn't like this kid, so I was like, come on, I'm not Eric. We laughed, and she was like, well, they just up and dumped 4 white boys in here, and she was like she was probably pushing 60, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. She was very respected and a very sweet lady. So I didn't take it any type of way. We were laughing about it. I mostly just did.
So you I mean,
but
it's a
in terms of like actual, sorry, cut you off there. But in terms of
that was me cutting you off. Go ahead.
In terms of any type of substantive like feeling of discrimination, like no, not really. I mean, like, I don't know. Sometimes maybe no, I really don't. Can't think of it. Like, even when I'll hear people like my dad, went to like a history of slavery museum, basically. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know if it's black owned, but he said the girl at the front was like kind of rude to him, and he was taking all offense by it. And it's like, well, I mean, fucking, I don't know, just like shut up. Like, like sometimes people are just rude, and like, you know what I mean? I don't know. Like, how did you come in? What did you come off like? You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of times people don't reflect on how they. So, I have an uncle who works in a primarily black, like, he works for transit in Philly. And he's like, oh, everybody's rude to me. They're all racist, whatever. I'm like, dude, I've heard you say racist shit. You probably come in racist vibes, and people can tell, and they don't fucking like you. Like,
question I have for you, Ty, something similar, well, related anyway, regarding your own activism in the Black Lives Matter movement and the current anti-Asian hate we're seeing across America, in some cases committed by black people. What is your response to that? Where do you think that's coming from, and how do you feel about it?
Well, I think there is a long history of minorities being pitted against each other, and that's something that people kind of get nurtured into. I know that in California it's quite a bit stronger. There is a lot of separation between those two communities, and it definitely came out of the LA riots. I mean, I would pinpoint it back to that, but even more so, and this is a conversation I actually had recently with my father, because he was, immigrants who come to the U.S. they're taught to assimilate and to stand down and don't speak up to racism and pressure and oppression, because you just want to get by and try to make it in this country. Now it's very different in my mind for black people who have been here, who were brought here against their will, and who've raised families and produced offspring who have been born into that oppression. And that feels very different for me. So I don't fault people, any which way. For me, it's all about having compassion and love and trying to educate people like we're on the same page. And I do that by, through my activism, most definitely. And, but yeah, I mean, I think that it's a historical thing that has happened, and mostly because my dad called it model minority. You're taught to be, and he was very much so taught to be a model minority and to not make waves. That's the word. That's the phrase he says a lot. Don't make any waves. And I think being a second generation born feminist, I think that I very much pushed against that. And my dad realized like this generation of immigrants, we often do that, and he didn't realize how much he felt like he was playing into that divergence of black and brown people, and not recognizing that we are one and the same. In that we are facing the same oppression, especially from white people, and so to work together and to be able to recognize that together and say, you know what, I'm gonna fight for you, and you can fight for me when the time comes. That's, I think, very important.
What you just stated, you know what I'm saying, your response is a perfect segue to something I want to touch on. And actually, I started off with an idea to have this interview titled Divergent, Convergence, diverse backgrounds and belief systems, yet converging, you know what I'm saying, on the call of the day in terms of trying to rectify what's going on in the criminal justice system, what's going on in policing, what's going on in discrimination all across the board, the rise of continued rise, rather, of white supremacy backed by a former president of the United States. So the next question is, because this is something that I did hear you mention earlier in the interview, your anarchist belief. And so the question I have is, and I heard you mention your Christian belief, and I've spoken to me and Kid have spoken about this before. So first of all, the question for both of you, and there are other guys that have to take some of this time, so I want to try to be as brief, but nevertheless full as you can in this response, because we're running out of time. But the question is, why anarchism? And this question for both of you. You first, Kid.
I mean, to me, it all just boils down to everybody being equal, just a belief in equality, and in a belief that, like, as much as I don't have any right to have any power over anybody else, nor does anybody have any right to have any power over me. And so when I extrapolate that and look at the systems in place, they're all based on power. Everything that we have currently in the world seemingly is based on, some sort of power, right? You got the landlords, the police, bosses. Everybody has a say. Everybody gets to manage your time in some type of way, or you become, the potential target of, like if you don't go to work and instead you steal food, you might end up in prison. If you don't pay for housing, you just find a vacant house and you live there, then you just you might get arrested for squatting. So there's almost no way to exist within this society in a way that doesn't force you to do some kind of assimilation. But that in and of itself is, to me, wrong. I just feel like, things would be better if they were built on what kind of I was talking about with regard to, like, you have my back, I have yours. Like, if they were built on, mutual aid and mutual cooperation, rather than hoarding houses or allowing some people to do that and then profit off of them. We can recognize that there are millions of vacant homes and, less than 1 million homeless people. So there's no reason for that. We can I work at a grocery store, recognize that we throw away food left and right, but yet there's 100,000 people in Milwaukee who go hungry every day. But I am working at a grocery store being told to throw food away. You know what I mean? So all these systems, all the things that we have in place are just exerting an unnatural and immoral power over us to force us to do things to advance people who are not us, basically.
Okay. And you, Ty?
Yeah, so I'm gonna touch on a couple of parts of that. So first of all, I wouldn't say I'm a Christian at all.
Okay.
I'm only belonging to my church, and that's because of what my church is and does and expresses. Now, the first and last thing that we always do is talk about the most marginalized people of our society, and that we pray for, and that we want to work to do the things that we can to bring up those people, because we as a society are no better than the worst off person that lives among us.
Pardon the interruption. And what church is that? One more time.
So I belong to St. Benedict the Moor Parish. It's a Catholic church. It was the first and only Black Catholic church in Milwaukee. The only Catholic school that would allow Black children to come to it. And our altar has the Ugandan martyrs on it. It's a very special and unique thing. And so the work that we do, church itself is secondary to the work that we do. We have a meal program that runs 6 days a week to feed the hungry. Anyone is able to come. You don't have to fill out no paperwork. You don't gotta do nothing to come and have a meal there. We do our jail ministry, and we house people. So people who are coming out of prison into reentry, people who are homeless, we have an apartment building. We also used to do healthcare work, but that's since been absorbed by a broader healthcare industry. But so the work of my church is primary, and the church itself is secondary. And we have issues. Our people at my church have issues with the Catholic Church itself, and so that's.
No, the call was breaking up. I couldn't really hear. I didn't mean to throw you off course either. But back to so why anarchism?
Well, for me, it was a journey. Like, I sort of, as a kid, you want to reject the things you've been taught and all that. And so I really thought, like, maybe communism was the right thing. I know that there's a lot of communists in the Philippines, and that's a large thing. But when I really looked into it, I took, because communism is everybody pulls their weight, everybody does a little bit of work, and we all share reap the benefits of that. But I truly think that still is a part and parcel to capitalism. That system feeds into this broader structure of the world economy of capitalism. And so I believe, and I've always felt, that money should be abolished. We don't need fucking money. We have resources, and if everybody just shared and traded their resources for what they wanted, that's how my parents worked in California. My mom would trade dental care and dental hygiene work for things. So we had pottery, had glass, we had any kind of artist or somebody who had something that they could give, they would trade that for dental work. And so I understood, like, okay, everybody working together is great, but to a broader extent, everybody working together without the system of capitalism involved is
just continue. Just continue. Yes.
That everybody working together outside of capitalism is even better. And so that's why I chose anarchism to be my, I don't know, ideology, I would say.
Okay, now, well, let me touch on that briefly. I mean, when you break down the word in this Greek meaning, and meaning like no or against, archis, I believe that's the proper word or the proper pronunciation, or archos, ruler. So basically, no ruler. But when you come to organizing, like some of the organizing things you do, I mean, there has to be some type of, I guess, whether you call it voluntarily or organic, some type of leadership involved in order to do this organizing. So how do you, isn't that kind of opposed to the meaning of the word, or how do you do organizing without some form of leadership involved in the process?
Do you mind if I respond to this
one?
Yeah,
go ahead, Kent. Yes.
So I do think that in certain situations there do become people who are followed for whatever reason, whether it's specifically with regard to organizing, the way that I think of anarchy is I think of it as a method. And the method is that we all have equal say and we all have equal right to participate or withdraw participation. So
Yes.
with the Litify, there is no person who makes decisions for the group. We will come together either, via messages, or we'll have an in-person meeting, and somebody will say like Ty, for example, was like, I want to do a podcast, and everybody was like, cool, how can we support you with that? So Ty got her idea. We kind of threw in some other ones like, oh, what if we did this, or what if we did that? And it becomes a collaborative process. And yes, the seed idea was Ty's, and Ty is the host, and we're basically kind of supporting her vision, but nobody's forced to participate in a way that they don't want to. If somebody had an idea for wanting to do something that nobody was in favor of, they would just either take it on themselves or recognize that lack of support and reconsider the other aspects of what it is that isn't drawing the support. So
okay, listen. Yes, hey, listen.
I would say that whoever leads projects, there is sometimes a leader of a project, like Kit was saying, but there's not a leader of the lit supply, and no decision gets made with just one person. So even if I want to change something, I'm asking for input from either the group or at least one other person to make those decisions. Kit, you're pretty much the leader of the actual lit supply, letters and requests fulfilling, but you put it out there for when there's work to be done for other people to join in and support that whenever that's possible. And so it's very much so non-hierarchical, but yes, you're right, there is some.
Well, I guess there is a difference between leadership and rulership when we go into the root meaning of the word. Yeah. Well, listen, I wish we had more time, and this is something that I may even want to revisit, because we just get into this particular topic, this particular part of the topic, this particular topic of the conversation anyway, an interview. But we're out of time. But let me say this here. I would like to get a final word from each of you, and I remember this quote you shared with me, Kit, and a final word to the audience from either one of you, from both of you, brother. And also, Kit, please do close with that quote you gave me before from Toni Morrison. I can't remember it, but I'll leave that to you. But you first, Ty, any word on any topic, whatever you want to say, whatever message you have regarding Black Lives Matter movement, anti-Asian hate, or neither of the two, anything. What do you want to say to the audience going forward, or any type of project you might be involved in that you want the people to know about? You too, Kit. You first, Ty.
Final word for me would be that if you feel in your heart that what you want to do is right, you should do it. And the work that we do should always be done with joy in mind. This is a very prison work, and abolition is a very depressing and put you down type of work, because all we're doing is dealing with badness. But we got to find joy in what you do. I want to say one of the first things that Kit and I ever did together was to like they said, to advertise or show people in Milwaukee that there was a prison strike going on. And so we had a bike parade. We put all our bike stuff together and dressed them up and made big banners that said prison strike.
Yeah.
And so you should find joy and laughter and fun in what you want to do and make that project happen. Don't ever get pessimistic or pulled down by the system and by all of the stopgaps that are in place to make you feel like you can't get it done, because you always can. And reach out to those people that are saying that they do want to help in some kind of way. Sometimes people don't know how to help, and so you got to tell them, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to help. So just try to remember that for the audience.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And you, Kit?
Yeah. It's just important to remember that, so I'll just say this quote, and this will basically summarize what I was saying, because this is, something that has struck me previously and that it kind of stays with me. And I just looked it up so that I could say it exactly right. But basically the quote from Toni Morrison is, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. And if you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else.
That's deep. Damn.
Yes. Hey, listen, thanks for the time. In fact, I want to say this to the audience myself. Right when I called, this podcast is being done on phone. They had just finished. What was the work you was just doing? I want the audience to hear from you instead of me, so I don't get it wrong. Right before I called, you were doing what type of work?
It was mutual aid food distribution on the south side of Milwaukee, where they had it was the Turners and the DSA chapter of Milwaukee, where they put together like $120 gift cards and some other denomination of gift cards. They had 500 boxes of food, and they were giving out one box to every person who basically came up, and they were giving out gift cards to anybody who asked for them for a grocery store. And it's just a mutual aid effort to help anybody who needs it. And yeah.
And how fast did they run out of boxes?
We went through them all. I mean, it actually worked out pretty perfectly. Went through them all by about 1 p.m. So and it started at noon. So in an hour, we got rid of 500 boxes and all the gift cards and everything. And right now they had set up like a DJ and a barbecue, and they were just having a little picnic out there. But we left because we had to go help a friend with something else.
Okay, listen, I just want the audience to hear that. And listen, keep the work up. Please give me the Toni Morrison quote one more time. We're going to close out.
All right. Just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else.
This is Kulamani. Speak out, speak truth, and reach out and speak out. Take care.